Today we have a very special treat. The treat is we have a very, very awesome godly man here in our fellowship. And he's standing on my right. And I mean that. I'm not trying to butter him up. Ray Yungen is here with us. And he's been here before. A couple of years ago he spoke here. And Ray is it's one of those guys that the Lord has put in our ministry path to bless the church in these days. He's so knowledgeable what's going on in the world today, knowledgeable what goes on in the world, in the Christian world, and God has given him a lot of insights. He travels throughout America. He recently went to Europe, and Ray Yungen has a ministry called Time of Departing, and what he comes to us is to speak about what goes on in the world today in terms of Christianity and what is coming into the Christian world. Part of our ministry and part of any Christian ministry is to know that there are deceptions in our world today. It all started in the garden. Remember the garden? Remember Satan and comes in as a serpent, gave us a different gospel, a different message. From that point on, God's people have always heard a different message. The world has heard a different message than the one God wanted. And it's as believers, we're to protect, we're to guard, we're to share that message that God has given us. But we also need to be aware of another message that does not lead to heaven. It does not lead to Jesus. It does not lead to the Word of God. But it's prevalent. But it's real and it's prevalent. And the Lord has given Ray insight into different messages that come into the world that it even deceives people thinking that is a Christian message, but it's not. And God has given him some insights, and he's here to share with us. And I want you guys to pay close attention to what he has to say. We're sharing the pulpit with Ray, and he's a godly man. And I wouldn't share this pulpit without knowing that he's a godly man and he loves the Lord, and God has given him a great ministry. And so, with all that said, please help me welcome Ray Yungen.
One of the indications that we're living in the last days is that there is spiritual deception, right? Spiritual deception. Well, that's what we're going to be looking at here this morning is spiritual deception. And this has been documented. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not something that can't be proven. This is very provable. How many of you heard the term New Age? Okay, that's basically what we're looking at here. It's not called that anymore. Hasn't been called that since the 80s. But Christians call it that because what the New Agers call it is spiritual, being spiritual. So what they call spiritual is what we call New Age. Eckhart Tolle, very closely associated with Oprah, recently was being interviewed, and he said that spirituality has become mainstream. And what he meant by that is what you're about to see has become mainstream. It wasn't this way a few decades ago. It was hidden and obscure, and nobody knew what these things were all about. And I'm going to say some things here this morning that are very, very controversial, extremely controversial, but I believe that I can prove that what I'm saying is accurate. Next slide, please. New Age didn't crest in popularity and then disappear. It soaked into society. And this was, as you can see, Terry Mattingly in 1986. And we're going to look at a few books here that document this. Now, these books are from professors. These books are not from crackpots or radicals or extremists. These books are from professors who have researched this and have documented that what I'm showing you is happening. Next one. This is called The Making of the New Spirituality by Professor James Herrick, and he says that the revealed word tradition, that's us, that's Christianity, the Bible, the revealed word tradition, is slowly being dismantled and is being replaced by what he calls a new religious synthesis. I know that sounds like an intellectual type term, but what he means is all, everything is one. Everything is coming together. There's like a melding of all the world's religions. And he calls that the new religious synthesis. Okay, next one. How many of you have heard somebody say that they're spiritual but not religious? Okay, quite a few of you. Well, anyhow, that's usually if somebody says that, that means they're into New Age type practices, because you don't have to go to church. See, church is usually connected with religion. You know, if you're going to church, you're religious, but you don't have to go to church for this type of practice. Okay, this is Professor Robert C. Fuller. He says that huge numbers of Americans have embraced what he refers to as unchurched spirituality, which is in effect New Age spirituality. Okay, next one. Okay, this is a book on Hindu religious practices. It's called American Veda. Now, the Vedas are the Hindu scriptures. The Veda is the Bible in Hinduism. And this Philip Goldberg says, Hindu mysticism has profoundly affected the worldview of millions of Americans and radically altered the religious landscape, which I'll prove later. Okay, next one. This is from the religion editor of the New York Times. I can't even begin to pronounce his last name. It's probably French. It's probably radically different from the way it looks. But he says the slow motion collapse, very heavy emphasis here on slow motion. You know, this isn't something that happens just overnight. The slow motion collapse of traditional faith, that's Christianity, and the rise of a variety of pseudo-Christianities. That means phony Christianities that stroke our egos, indulge our follies, and encourage our worst impulses. Next, please. Okay, Baylor University is a Baptist university in Texas, and they did a survey on what America really believes, as you can see in 2007. And according to the survey, up to 26 million Americans view God as a cosmic force rather than a personal being. You know, this is like the Star Wars, you know, may the force be with you. That God is a cosmic force. And many of you may think, well, that's kind of, you know, unsophisticated or kind of far out. You know, who would believe that? America has traditionally believed that God is a personal being. Okay, next. Well, 26 million people, that would be more adherents than Episcopalians, Lutherans, Presbyterians, United Methodists combined. And these have been traditionally the major denominations in the United States. They're called the mainline denominations that have defined religion in America. So that means there's more New Agers than all of these denominations put together. Okay, next one. And you can prove that by the law of the market. The law of the market is supply and demand, that if there's a big demand for something, there's going to be a big supply for it. And this was Borders Bookstore in my hometown before Borders went out of business. And the New Age section, it was called Metaphysics. That means beyond the physical, supernatural. It started right there. Okay, next one. And all that. There were 65 shelves devoted to New Age spirituality in Borders. Now, I want to give a big hearty thank you to Pastor Marco, because he made it, and Lynette Irwin, of course. They made it possible for me to go to Europe this last summer, and I researched there on the law of the market. I went to the biggest bookstore in Dublin, Ireland, Dusseldorf, Germany, and Birmingham, England. And I counted how many shelves there were devoted to this. And in Dublin, it was the Waterstone bookstore, and it had 80 shelves devoted to New Age spirituality. Then I went to the one in Dusseldorf, Germany. It had 88 shelves devoted to New Age spirituality. Then I went to Birmingham. Now, Birmingham is the second largest city in England. It's like the Chicago, or L.A., I should say L.A. It's like the L.A. of England. And Chicago used to be the second. They always called it the second city, remember? And anyhow, now L.A. has surpassed it, 3.5 million. But anyhow, I went to Birmingham, 100 shelves devoted to New Age spirituality. 100. So the religion section was on the next floor down, the third floor, so I went down there. And the religion section was 26 shelves, so you had 26 versus 100, but only half the religion section was Christian. And in the Christian section, most of the authors were New Age authors, Rob Bell, Brian McLaren, people you probably heard here, that were into this kind of stuff from a Christian perspective. So going by the law of the market, the New Age has virtually swept Christianity out of the marketplace in Europe. And we'll get to that later. Ireland, I thought, would be traditionally Catholic. You always think of Ireland Catholic as being, synonymous, like, Mexico is, predominantly Catholic. So you think that the two are the same, but that's not true. The New Age has, in every little town, the New Age has swept the Catholic Church out of Ireland. And again in Germany. So going by the law of the market, this is a very, very pervasive phenomenon. Okay, next please. Just one. Now, you would think witchcraft would not be that popular, right? Because, witchcraft's kind of, what would you say, kind of creepy, kind of weird. Here's the founder of modern witchcraft, known as Wicca, Gerald Gardner. He was an Englishman, and he revived Wicca by writing this book called Witchcraft Today in the 1950s. And that got the ball rolling here. Well, now, okay, next one. Now Wicca is hugely popular. This is a website called The Witch's Voice, and they came online in 1997. And since 1997, they have gotten 480 million hits. Now, that's nearly 500 million hits since 1997, 500 million. And of course, that's not just the U.S., that's England and Canada and Australia and places like that, the English-speaking world. But there are, just Wicca alone, just one denomination in this New Age spectrum has grown at a staggering rate, just a staggering rate. Okay, next. Harry Potter, a lot of people, view Harry Potter as, benign. It's just fiction. And, there's certain Christians out there like Carol Matriciana and Joanna Michelson who have warned about Harry Potter. But I just stumbled on this on my own. In the third book, The Prisoner of Azkaban, there's real witchcraft in it. I mean, not made up. It's on page 297. Harry Potter is in the divination class, and the professor says, crystal gazing is a particularly refined art. We shall start by practicing relaxing the conscious mind, which is meditation, and externalize so as to clear the inner eye and the superconscious. Now, that term superconscious is a term you actually find in witchcraft. That's like a, buzzword, like, evangelicals will say the finished work of Christ and things like that. Well, that's the equivalent in, that's what witches say they connect to, is the superconscious, this realm where spirit guides dwell. And the inner eye is a reference to the third eye chakra. Now, people have said, well, get a life, Harry Potter is just fiction, it's just, a book for kids. But it's like the Wizard of Oz. Well, in the Wizard of Oz, you don't find the wicked witch of the West talking about the superconscious, do you? See what I mean? You get my emphasis here. In other words, when I saw that superconscious, I knew that J.K. Rowling had a very familiar, she knew the buzzwords and terms of real witchcraft. Okay, next one. The reason I brought that out is because, this explosion in Wicca, I believe there is a correlation between that and the Harry Potter phenomenon. Okay, what is mysticism? It is a belief that direct knowledge of God, spiritual truth, or ultimate reality, knowledge of God can be attained through subjective experience. In other words, mysticism is when you have encounters with this other realm, with this supernatural realm. Okay, next. And that is done primarily through the practice of meditation. Now, this picture, I want you to pay very close attention to this picture, because this is exactly what we're talking about. This person is doing this, this practice of meditation, and there's this light coming down and indwelling them. And this is one of the reasons I first started to research this phenomenon, because there was a supernatural element to it. It wasn't intellectual. It wasn't like, being a liberal or a conservative. I found out that people were attuning to supernatural realms. And in a way, once you find out this is real, it's not just their imagination, you get alarmed, you get concerned, because these people are being guided and directed from another source. Okay, next one. And there's 3 different ways of doing this. First one is reciting a mantra. That's a word or phrase spoken over and over again, say 20 minutes. Next is focusing on the breath. The next is percussion sounds, not like, drumming here, but Like in shamanic cultures, they just, there's no melody. There's just a constant pounding of a drum or whatever, and they focus on that, and that acts as kind of like a mantra. Okay, next. And this is the purpose of meditation. And keep in mind, when I say meditation, I'm not talking about what the Bible says about meditation, just thinking about things. It's completely different. Okay, meditation is the doorway between worlds, the pathway between dimensions. This is Celeste Graham in her book, The Layman's Guide to Enlightenment. So you actually go through a doorway, a mental doorway or a mystical doorway. Okay, next one. And this is the experience that happens when you go through that doorway. Now keep in mind, if this is just some cult members, we're not talking about cults here. If these were just cult members off in the San Bernardino mountain somewhere, then it wouldn't really pertain to you, right? Well, as you're about to see, this pertains to you because, well, you'll see in a moment. Okay, one starts by silencing the mind. For many, this is not easy. But when the mind has become silent and still, it is then possible, okay, do you see that? Possible for the divine force to descend and enter into the receptive individual. First it trickles and later it comes in waves. So when you do this, it makes it possible for what this woman called the divine force to descend and enter into the receptive individual. It makes you receptive. But the big question here this morning is it the divine force? Okay, next. The meditation explosion. That's why there's 26 million people that believe God is a cosmic energy. Okay, next. This is Time Magazine. New Age mumbo jumbo, not for millions of Americans who meditate for health and well-being. Okay, next. So how did this get so popular? We're going to digress here a little bit. And we're going to see where this came from. Before the 1960s, this wasn't something that was part of American culture or Western culture. How many of you have heard of the Woodstock Music Festival? Okay, practically all of you. Well, this is an advertisement for the Woodstock Festival, and it was in New York, outside of New York City, on a farm. What's that guy's name? What was it? Yasgur's farm. Yeah, Yasgur's. Max Yasgur. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you can see this, but you see the dove up there, or bird, or whatever that is? Okay, right to the right of that, you see where it says an Aquarian exposition. Do y'all see that? An Aquarian exposition. Well, see, that's what the term New Age means. It means the age of Aquarius. Remember that song by the Fifth Dimension? That it's an astrological term, and in occultism, this is the religion of occultism, there's these 2,000-year periods known as astrological ages, and each one is, has a sign of the zodiac, and they say we've been in the Piscean age for 2,000 years, and now we're moving into the Aquarian age, known as the new age of Aquarius, hence the new age. And it's new. We're moving into it. It's brand new. Well, in this new age, in this new age, there's going to be a one world religion and a one world, everything's going to be united. Mankind is going to be together. We're all going to be connected. So Woodstock, was 3 days of peace and love and all this. But what does astrology have to do with music, right? It's intriguing, right? Well, let me show you. Next one. Before there was, I hope that arrow doesn't look corny or anything, but anyhow, that guy sitting there is a Hindu Swami. Right before there was any music, right before any of the groups came out, Swami Satchidananda opened the festival by giving a lecture to this crowd of 500,000 people. And there's his disciples on both sides of him, and he was telling them that they should quit taking drugs, they should quit taking LSD and smoking pot, and they should even quit smoking cigarettes, and they should meditate. They should start doing meditation, and then they would really be happy, and they wouldn't need to do drugs, and they wouldn't need to, use alcohol or tobacco or whatever. So he gave them a religious lecture right before there was music. So that's why this was called an Aquarian exposition. It was because he was the religious leader of it. Okay, next one. And so that got the ball rolling, and pretty soon something called transcendental meditation started to become popular. And it really became popular. This is the guy the Beatles liked, the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and he was on the Merv Griffin show. How many of you remember Merv Griffin? Okay, quite a few of you. Well, he was on the Merv Griffin show in 1974, and after this show, by the way, Merv Griffin was a meditator. He was part of that. So, excuse me. After this show aired, meditation literally took off in American society, and people just started signing up for TM classes, and it became really popular. So that's how we got here, that through these avenues that were formed. Okay, next. So now this is where we're at. Okay, Costco. What's Costco? Like I said, what does Woodstock have to do with anything New Age? What does Costco have to do with anything New Age? Huh? Now, I really got your curiosity, right? I got what is this? Anyhow, this is the July issue of the Costco Connection. In it, we find, okay, next, the following: mindful matters, meditation is medicine. By the way, that's not a typo there. That's how they spell it. It's been around for centuries and integral to the practice of Buddhism. Yet, until recently, meditation was often regarded as some strange, new agey, Eastern mind-body thing. Okay, no more. No more. This is in Costco magazine. They are pushing something called mindfulness. Now, this term mindfulness is sweeping the Western world right now. It's sweeping American society. In Ireland, Cork, Ireland, I found in the bookstore there, they had a whole table just devoted to mindfulness. And what mindfulness is Zen Buddhist meditation. It's focusing on your breath. Zen Buddhist meditation. It's called mindfulness. It's from one of the, it's a term from the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, right mindfulness, which means being in the right consciousness. And this is why I said this pertains to you, because this practice of mindfulness is now completely being embedded in the field of psychological counseling, drug and alcohol rehabilitation, the health field, sports and fitness, and business and success training. Sooner or later, if not already, either you or one of your family members or one of your friends or co-workers or someone like that is going to be introduced to mindfulness in some way. Okay, next. Time magazine has talked about it, has done articles on it. There's even a mindful magazine, in grocery stores. This is a huge phenomenon. Okay, next. This is General Mills Corporation in Michigan, and their employees do mindfulness meditation. They just lay there on their bellies, focusing on their breath, and that supposedly will make them better employees. Again, this is being promoted for non-religious reasons. This is being promoted, get you off drugs or alcohol, or it'll make you a better person. Okay, next. And this is one of the people that's driving this. This is Arianna Huffington, who founded the Huffington Post. I suppose many of you know what the Huffington Post is. And she wrote this book called Thrive. And it's on the New York Times bestseller. And again, hats off to Lynette Irwin, because a few days ago she found that Arianna Huffington is putting on this conference that brings together, let's see if I can, it's kind of hard to, but these are all the people. Arianna Huffington is right there. And all these people are shakers and movers in society. The top people in society, and there's 60 of them, all these 60 people, and the goal, let me explain what the goal is, okay? It starts out with 1.0 society, is that it? 1.0. Okay, that's just survival. That's when you're just surviving, 1.0. And then 2.0 is when you're successful, but you're miserable. 2.0 is when you got a lot of money, but you're stressed out, you're not happy, you got problems with work, you got problems in your relationships. But what this conference is about is 3.0 society, and that's when you thrive. You're thriving, because you're integrated with your spiritual component. You're integrated with your higher self. And the goal of Arianna Huffington and all these 60 people is to turn the entire country into a country where everybody does mindfulness. In essence, it's like the whole country becomes one giant cult. Because it is, and she says in this book that it is being instituted in organizations and institutions around the world. It's becoming like in schools. It'll become like when you go to even a college, university, wherever, it'll be just something they do. You're expected to do it. Okay, next one. She says, when you consider all the benefits of meditation, it's not an exaggeration to call meditation a miracle drug. That's how it's being seen, as a miracle drug. No wonder mindfulness and meditation are being increasingly adopted, like I said, by corporations and institutions around the world, throughout the world. And by institutions, I mean like schools, hospitals, things like that. It's expected that you're going to have to do this because it's, like a miracle drug now. Okay, next. Okay, this is Dan Harris. He is a newscaster with ABC News. How many of you have ever seen him? Yeah, Nightline. He's on Nightline, and I think he's on the Weekend News, ABC. Well, he got into this, and he wrote this book, and he's one of the I think he's one of the people on this in this forum here. But he wrote this book that he used to be a skeptic. He thought it was like like the Time magazine article said, New Age mumbo jumbo, and he started to practice, and now he says it's changed his life. And before he was cynical and nervous and uptight. Now he's just really happy. So he wrote this book on how to reduce stress and found self-help. It says self-help that actually works. So Dan Harris is, not just him, huge numbers of people. Like I said, Costco is promoting this as the wave of the future. Okay, next. And like I said, this is Cork, Ireland, second largest city in Ireland. And in the bookstore there, they had a whole table devoted to mindfulness. Every one of those books there is on this practice of mindfulness. So even in Ireland, Great Britain had a lot of them. Germany had a lot of them. If you went to Australia, Canada, it's becoming extremely popular. Excuse me, next. So if you were at your work, say they had a meeting and you were expected to try this or do this, and you said, no, I don't think I want to, what would you tell them? Why is this bad? What's wrong with this? Well, in this book, The Pocket Guide to Meditation, and mindfulness means meditation. It used to mean like be mindful of your manners, right? Now be mindful not to slurp your soup, But now it means meditation. Okay, through meditation we become attuned to spirit. Okay, spirit. What is spirit? What do you mean we become attuned to spirit? Okay, next. Well, this is what it means. This is Beginner's Guide to Mediumship. How do you know what a medium is? Oh, not many. Wow. Okay, a medium is someone who talks to the dead. A medium in a seance, there's a medium and she goes into trance. That he or she talks to the dead. And another term for it is channeling. Communication with the dead. And there you see this picture of this woman in a trance. There's all these spirits around her. Anyhow, it says, and this is what you would tell an employer or teacher or whatever they wanted you to do, mindfulness. Meditation is the key to unlocking the door of mediumship. For without meditation, there is no mediumship. How many of you really know this? How many of you knew that, this is how you get attuned to spirits? A total and deep trance occurs when the mind is completely blank, when mind chatter has been overridden. That means thinking. Mind chatter is thinking. If you continue the flow of uninterrupted trance, spirit contact and visions can occur. Next, please. This is Ken Wilber, one of the major intellectual figures in New Age spirituality. He says, if you're doing meditation correctly, you're in for some very rough and frightening times. Meditation as a relaxation response is a joke. By rough and frightening times, you can imagine what he means by that. Okay, next. This is Utni Reader, Okay? When a meditator is led to expect stress reduction, remember those people at General Mills, and instead comes face to face with his true self, spirit guide, the result can be anything but relaxing. This is from people that are for it. This is not critics or someone who's a Christian. This is people that are sympathetic with it. Next. Okay, this is probably the most convincing thing that I would present to you that really, really nails it. This Marty Kaplan, he was a secular Jewish screenwriter in Hollywood. Didn't have a religious bone in his body. And he had a problem biting his nails. So he went to his doctor. Okay, did you get that? He went to his doctor, He didn't go to some Indian guru or anything. He went to his doctor, and his doctor told him to do mindfulness. He'd stop biting his nails then. Very simple. So this is what happened. He said, I got mind-body medicine. That's another term for meditation. He says, I got more from mind-body meditation than I bargained for. I got religion. You don't have to believe in anything. All you have to do is do it. See, it's not intellectual. It's not where somebody convinces you of, that you have to believe this or that. Okay, next. Okay, it ambushed me. I want you to all remember that. It ambushed me. In other words, he wasn't expecting it. He got ambushed. Unwittingly, in other words, he didn't know what he was really doing. Unwittingly, I was engaging in a practice that has been at the heart of religious mysticism for millenniums. Now I know there is a consciousness that transcends science. By consciousness, that means there's something out there. There's a force out there that people don't know about, a consciousness toward which our species is sputteringly evolving. So that's another term that humanity is evolving spiritually, and this is one of the things that's helping it along. Okay, next. Okay, yoga. This is where it gets really complicated, because yoga is now practiced by 15 million people on a daily basis in the U.S. 15 million practice yoga every single day. Okay, next. Around the world, 250 million people practice yoga worldwide. It has become a huge phenomenon. And this is just over the last 25 years or so. Started in the early 90s, and it has just spread like wildfire. How many of you have seen commercials like, what's that, the Honda Fit? The Honda Fit, that little car. How many of you have seen the commercial where you got this? It says, what can you do in a Honda Fit? And it shows this person meditating in the trunk. Have any of you seen that? Okay, anyhow, somebody told me they saw that. That's the name of the car, the Honda Fit. So anyhow, yoga has become, normal in American culture. Just, no longer thought of as being weird or strange. Okay, next. Okay, yoga for fitness. Let me see. There should be a picture there. Well, anyhow, there should be a picture of this woman there who's the head of this organization. And Yoga Fit has become the largest yoga school in North America and has trained some 200,000 instructors worldwide. So just this one organization has trained not 200,000 people to do yoga, but trained 200,000 people to teach yoga. That means if each one trains 1,000 people, that's 200 million people. Just that one organization. Okay, there's the book. At least we got the picture there. I know this is controversial. But just bear with me, be patient. Okay, Yoga Fit. That sounds like we're talking about fitness, right? Fitness. Notice it says the program for a more powerful, flexible, and defined physique. There's nothing evil about that, anti-Christian about that, is it? Is there? Nothing bad about that. But this is what it says in that book. The ancient practice of meditation is as integral, that means essential, to yoga as the poses are. And they have the same intention, not to tune out, but to tune in to a frequency long forgotten and perhaps undiscovered. So in this book, she says yoga is about tuning into a frequency. And what does that frequency say? Okay, next one. Okay, this is another magazine that's out there in the stores, and this is Andrew Weil. He's a guy with a big bushy beard. You've probably seen his picture if you've stood in line in grocery stores. And he says the poses are not meant to be the end in themselves, since it is possible to become proficient at the postures without the more important job of learning to still the mind. So again, these people are saying that yoga is not simply doing these exercises, it's about, tuning into a frequency. Okay, next. The goal is spiritual health. Many people who are at first uninterested in meditation when they take up yoga practice gradually discover its value. Yoga's ultimate aim is spiritual health, not physical health. Now, I know millions of people are attracted to it by the idea of physical health, and that's why I said, this is controversial. Somebody, might say, well, what's so bad about yoga? What's so sinful about stretching? There's nothing bad about it. But as you can see, meditation is supposed to go with yoga. The two are supposed to, be synonymous. Okay, next. Well, this is what yoga is all about. This is the philosophy of yoga, and you can call up any yoga instructor, go to any yoga studio, look on the internet. We are all born divine. This is the classic statement of the perennial philosophy of yoga. Okay, next. What we are seeking, is already at the core of our nature. We are already inherently perfect. It means that God is available fully at each moment simply because God is our true nature. Well, as you can see, those of you who have studied Christianity or studied the Bible know that what you've just read here, is the polar opposite of what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches we're all born sinners, disconnected from God, and we're reconciled to God by the death of His Son, and that we're justified by His blood, and that we're partakers of the divine nature through faith. We're baptized into the body of Christ through faith. See, if this is true, if we're all born divine and God is our true nature when we're born, there's no need for the cross, right? There's no need for having to believe the gospel, right? It nullifies it. So this is why I put yoga in here, because its philosophy is the polar opposite of Christianity. Okay, next. And how many of you know what yoga means? How many of you really know what yoga means? I want to see a show of hands. Okay, we got three people. What the word yoga means is union. That's what it means, union. And it means union with God. Union with God. And at the beginning and end of every yoga class, the teacher will put his or her hands together like there, like in a prayer type thing. And then they'll bow to the class and say, Namaste. How many of you heard that term, Namaste? Oh, quite a few of you, yeah. And what that means is the God in me bows down to the God in you. The God in me bows down to the God in you. And that is the very essence of New Age spirituality. So all these 250 million people doing yoga worldwide, and 15 million people who do it on a daily basis in the U.S. have bought into basically New Age spirituality, which is in effect shaping the entire culture along these lines. Okay, next. Alice Bailey, the woman who coined the very term New Age, said, she channeled the information that this coming one world religion was going to start to manifest at the end of the 20th century, and that there would be this individual she called the coming one who would unite the world under this spiritual system. Said the yogi, or the one who has achieved union, for yoga is the science of union, knows himself as he is in reality. He knows himself to be past all controversy. Did you get that? Past all controversy, God. So there's no controversy about it. Humanity is God. Humanity is divine. Okay, next. This is Aleister Crowley, known as the wickedest man in the world. He called himself the Beast 666. And he was known as being, incredibly wicked. He was a proponent of occultism. Okay, next. Well, he was a practitioner and proponent of yoga. And here we have 8 lectures by him on yoga, the most scientific and informative work on yoga ever written. So these people that were clearly, dyed-in-the-wool occultists saw yoga as integral to the coming New World religion. Okay, next. This is a man who was a medium, Arthur Ford. He was very famous, and he had a spirit guide for 43 years. 43 years. And when he died, his last words were, "God help me," as he passed into the arms of his spirit guide. And I think at that moment he realized what had happened. I think at that moment he had realized that, he had made a terrible mistake. God help me. Okay, next one. Well, he got into it. He met his spirit guide through yoga. According to Ford, it was Swami Yogananda who first instructed on how to meditate and how to enter a trance state by himself, which allowed him to make contact with the world of spirit. So it was a Hindu guru in the practice of yoga that connected him with his spirit guide. And as you can tell, go back to where we just were. As you can tell, when you say, "God help me," it's not a positive thing. It's like he suddenly realized that, what have I done? What have I done? Okay, next. Well, again, this John C. White was another guy that was very popular, a writer in occult circles. And he wrote, "Learning how to meditate was perhaps the most important event in my life. By doing meditation, yoga, or whatever you do as a discipline, you can set up your environment so the spirit can come and work with you." And that's what, union, that's what it's about. Next one. See, that's what I'm emphasizing here. Remember, yoga means union. But union with what? Union with what? Well, union with God, but not the God of the Bible, because the people that have union, in the yoga sense, have union with a force or power that tells them that they're born divine, that all they need is within them, that, they are God themselves. Okay, next one. Still skeptical? Okay, this is, I know a lot of you will go out and say, I heard this guy last Sunday, and he said that, yoga's of the devil. Oh, get off it. That's crazy, That's crazy. Well, what I'm about to show you is proof that what I'm saying is true. I used to go to Borders bookstore, and I would go to the yoga section, and it would be in the fitness section. The yoga section was in the fitness section. Did y'all get that? It was in the fitness section. It wasn't in the New Age section. It wasn't in the religion section. It wasn't in the philosophy section. It was in the New Age section. Usually 5-6 shelves. Okay, next. And in every one of these books on yoga, you would find these terms. Like, there's 8 limbs to yoga, 8 limbs, and the top one is samadhi. And samadhi is God consciousness, the 8 limbs of yoga, samadhi, when you connect with God. Okay, but how do you connect with God? What is this all about? Okay, next. Well, in every book on yoga, you would find something about the chakras. And these are the energy centers of yoga. There's 7 of them. And as you meditate, that's why meditation is integral to yoga. The stretching, in fact, the stretching is done just so you can limber yourself up to meditate. So you would find these chakras, and as you meditate, they open. They're not physical, of course. They're not like your spleen or whatever, body part. They're supposed to be there, but invisible. And as you meditate, they activate, and this what's called the Kundalini energy, or the serpent force, goes surging up the spine. And as the Kundalini energy goes up the spine, I know this sounds like Star Trek or something. It sounds far out, but every book had it. And these centers would be opened and activated. And when the top one was activated, when the 6th one, how many have heard the term third eye? Okay, third eye is connected with the chakra system. It's the 6th one, right here between the forehead. And when that one opens, you have psychic powers. And when the 7th one opens, then you know that you're God. That's when you realize that you have connection with your God, the God within. And that is called samadhi in Hinduism. So this was in the fitness section. So I was seeing these pages that were talking about samadhi and chakras and kundalini in books in the fitness section. Okay, next. Well, this is the pocket guide to the chakras, and it says the 7th functions like a battery charger, renewing our connection with, again, spirit. If you ever see that term spirit, they're talking about spirit guides. Okay, beings on other planes are eager to communicate with you if you are willing to be receptive to them. Beings on other planes. Well, who are these beings on other planes? Well, I think we have the answer right here. And by the way, you can check this out for yourself. When I was in Ireland, Simon O'Shea, in his house there, we actually looked this up on the internet. So if you're skeptical, you can look this up yourself. This is in Ireland. Next one. Okay, there's a book out there, and I'm going to show you the book right after this. But in this book, it gives you basically, there's a whole chapter on the chakras and this type of thing, and it gives you a basic rundown of what Hindu or yoga is all about. In meditation, the mysterious psychic energy can be sent up through these centers. This potent force is called the Kundalini, or serpent power. As the mighty force begins to flow within you, these vital psychic centers, the chakras, begin to open in successive order. So this is from a particular book. And I'm going to show you the name of this book. Okay, next. Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft. There's the pentagram on the cover. So in this book on witchcraft, remember I showed you the Arthur Ford and, how the spirits can come work with you? This book confirms that the spiritual aspect of yoga is the same as the spiritual component of witchcraft, because it's all about working with spirits, connecting with spirits, and that the union in yoga is the same as the union in witchcraft. I know that sounds crazy, but you can look this up on the internet. You can prove it. Okay, next. This is from Yoga Journal. This is from just September, this last month. Okay, they had an article about this in Yoga Journal. The Ajna chakra, that's the third eye chakra, helps you receive the wisdom that cannot be seen or heard by the ordinary senses. Cannot be seen or heard by the ordinary senses. So just, last month in Yoga Journal, they were talking about the same thing. This wisdom is from spirit guides. So the essence is, if there were just a few people doing yoga, it wouldn't be so bad. It wouldn't have that much of an impact. But when you got millions of people doing yoga, and when you have it entrenched, when you have it embedded in, health clubs, YMCA, fitness clubs, here in California, there's yoga studios everywhere. Even in no matter where you go now. In Ireland, there was yoga classes in every little village in Ireland. It's become a phenomenon everywhere, and this is the spiritual basis of it. So when you add mindfulness and yoga, we're not talking about cults. Like I said, you can get this just anywhere, in school, in your workplace, at General Mills, you saw it. And this is the spirituality that goes with it. So this is changing the spiritual nature. Those books I showed you at the beginning of the talk, this is changing the entire spiritual culture of the U.S. and Canada and England and stuff. This is, there's a transformation going on. We're moving from a Christian-based society to a Eastern or occultic-based society, where instead of worshiping God as a personal being, we're now experiencing God as a cosmic force. In other words, basically what I'm saying is the religion of the chakras is sweeping through the Western world. Okay, next. This is a good example. If you're still skeptical, this is the guy that does the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. I think they've sold like 500 million of them. I'm not making that up. I've seen that. Well, he was raised in a Catholic family, and he was just, he wasn't a devout Catholic. He never went to Mass. He was just, a regular guy. He was going to college, and he decided to take a yoga class as an elective. He was a regular dude, and he was going to a normal college, and he was, thought yoga might be interesting. So he in this yoga class, I don't know how long it took, whether it was the first time or, he just says in his book, Dare to Win, that he had his spiritual awakening at a yoga class where he felt God flowing through all things. That's the God as a cosmic force again, God is in everything and everybody, flowing through all things. That means God is in bed bugs and turnips. That's what Elizabeth, I didn't make that up, Elizabeth Gilbert said that there was a book and there was a movie called Eat, Pray, Love. You ever heard of Eat, Pray, Love? It sold 8 million copies, and then there was a book with, I can't remember her name, a movie. Who was in the movie? Yeah, Julia Roberts was in the movie. But in the book, Elizabeth Gilbert says that God is in everything, including bed bugs and turnips. And that's because she was into yoga. She went to India to an ashram and did yoga there. Okay, next. Now here's where are you ready to really get freaked out? Okay? The 2012 study indicates that 8.7% of U.S. adults, or 20 million people, practice yoga. Okay, here's where it really gets scary. Of current non-practitioners, that's everybody else, 44% of Americans call themselves aspirational yogis, people who are interested in trying yoga. 44%. So there's, about 9% doing it now, but then nearly half of the rest are open to doing it or are interested in trying it. So in essence, think of how that would affect the spiritual nature of the country if these 44% actually carried it through. Okay, next. And a lot of major denominations are promoting this or helping it. This is U.S. Catholic, and recent, it says something about Pope Francis there. Spiritual exercises. Can other religious practices strengthen your Catholic core? Well, according to this magazine article, it can. Now, this is a mainstream Catholic publication. And in it says, this is May 2013, it says, it's not that we're bringing a Hindu practice into the church. It's a spiritual practice that happened to be used by Hindus, but could easily be used by anyone, including Christians. So in essence, they're saying, Hindus use it, but to get in touch with, their gods, but, Christians can use it too, because, you can just incorporate it and capture it for Christ, Anybody, it can be easily used by anyone. Well, in essence, when you use the practices of other religions, you get their gods. Right? Okay, next. Okay, Reiki. This is a big one. This is a huge one. This is something that, again, you find all over the world. Perhaps tens of millions of people are using it. By the way, how many of you have ever encountered Reiki? Oh, you have. Oh. Oh, okay. You know anything about it? Okay, here we go. Well, I'm glad you came this morning. This could be for you. Okay, next. Yeah, Reiki is a New Age energy healing method. I know this sounds something like Saturday morning kids' cartoons, but enough people do it, that it's apparently real. A lot of people have told me they've felt it. And that's when somebody puts their hands on you and this energy flows through them into you. It's a Japanese word, and it means basically, spiritual energy or God energy, or it can even be translated as ghost energy. But there's not just Reiki, there's 65 different energy healing methods out there. I could do a whole PowerPoint on them. I could do a whole hour on them. There's, numerous ones. And again, they're all based on the chakras. Yoga, Reiki, and I would say mindfulness are all based on the chakras. Okay, next one. And you can get this. Again, this isn't conspiracy theory. This isn't conjecture. This isn't me just, thinking that I see something here. This is from their own sources. During the Reiki attunement, this is the Everything Reiki book, during the Reiki attunement written by a Reiki master, during the Reiki attunement process, the avenue that is open within the body to allow Reiki to flow through also opens up the psychic communication centers. That's the chakras. This is why many Reiki practitioners report having verbalized channeled communications with the spirit world. Okay, next. This is the book Essential Reiki. Reiki guides are a group of discarnate, that means non-physical, healers that take part in every Reiki healing. The Reiki 1 practitioner is probably not aware of them, but with Reiki 2, they are beginning to make themselves known. In Reiki 3, they are running the whole show. Okay, next. This is Reiki News Magazine, and it shows a man they're doing it on someone. And he says, during every attunement ceremony, see, you don't learn Reiki, you're attuned to it. You go to a Reiki master and they attune you. Okay, did you get that? Every attunement ceremony, I'm always aware of the presence of my Reiki guides. Okay, as you can see, this is funny or weird. One's tragic and one's weird. On that magazine cover, teaching Reiki to children. You see that? And then right below it, Reiki and spring cleaning. I wonder what the correlation is there. Okay, next. Okay, this, usually, when you think of the occult, you think of dark, sinister things, right? Right? Well, maybe not. Okay. This is a woman who's a Reiki master in my neck of the woods in the suburbs of Portland. And she says, I worked with as many as 20 spirit guides during my Reiki treatments. There's 20 of them. They are my spiritual family. Many Reiki practitioners can feel the presence of their Reiki guides. So you're starting to get the point here. Now you know why there was something scary going on. Okay, next one. Diane Stein says, Reiki once belonged to everyone. The Reiki guides want it to be so again. Okay, next. Okay, the popularity of Reiki. Next. This woman is a Reiki master who lived in Europe for 13 years. She's an American, but she was in the Czech Republic. And it says worldwide, but during those 13 years, she initiated 43,000 people in Europe to do this, mainly in the Czech Republic. It says worldwide, but probably only 2,000 were outside of Europe. She has traveled all over Europe, Eastern Europe, Central Europe, initiating people into this. So she was able to produce 43,000 people there that did this on others. This one Reiki master. Okay, next one. According to the Reiki News magazine, 800 hospitals in the U.S., which are 15%, have a Reiki practitioner on staff. Okay, next. Day spas. In a Google search 5 years ago, with the words day spa and Reiki, there were 138,000 results. Today, there are over 2 million results. Okay, next one. A lot of celebrities are into this. Sandra Bullock wears Reiki-infused jewelry by Los Angeles designer and Reiki master Catherine Michaels. So Sandra Bullock is somebody who's very much involved with promoting this. Okay, next. How many remember the show Riverdance about 20 years ago? Well, this was the star of Riverdance then, Michael Flatley, and he goes, I swear by Reiki. And he goes on to say that it sounds crazy, but the evidence speaks for itself. I start to feel better as soon as the healer touches my injury. Okay, next one. Okay, here's what I mean, when I said earlier how the whole country is changing. Dr. Oz is a promoter of Reiki. Dr. Oz, on his show on January 6, 2010, Dr. Mehmet Oz revealed his ultimate alternative medicine secrets for 2010 during his nationally broadcast afternoon talk show. He ranked Reiki number 1, and Dr. Oz said, Reiki is one of my favorites. We've been using it for years in the Oz family, and we swear by it. We swear by it. Well, you know why they've been using it for years in the Oz family? Okay, next one. Because his wife is a Reiki master. She says in this book that she is a certified Reiki master. Okay, next. Okay, in Kentucky, in the heart of the Bible Belt, we have the Franklin County Board of Education and the Kentucky Department of Education promoting Reiki at a high school. 2012, a doctor in Kentucky sent this to you. Next one. Anyhow, it was at this high school in Frankfort, Kentucky. So it was the county Board of Education and then the Kentucky Department of Education were both promoting Reiki at a high school, which I thought was really wild. In Kentucky, I could see it in Berkeley, California, but but not in Kentucky, not in Frankfort, Kentucky. Okay, you can see it there. See where it says Reiki? I don't know, maybe. Anyhow, take my word for it. Okay, next. Okay, this is Raven Keyes. She wrote this book called The healing power of Reiki. She's a Reiki master, teacher, hypnotherapist, meditation teacher, workshop leader. Okay, next. And she says, we all have the right to connect to our spirit guides. We all have the right. Every person interested in Reiki can make a personal connection with a guide. Next one. This is a spirit who is the overseer of your Reiki experiences and is invaluable to those of us who practice Reiki. So there's a spirit who's an overseer of all this. Your Reiki master and spirit is a powerful being on whom you can depend. Now, Dr. Oz wrote the foreword to this book. He wrote the foreword to this book. Okay, next one. This was written by a woman in my area, Portland. She was a teacher, and she went to a Reiki master a Reiki channeler because she had a shoulder injury. Just a teacher, normal person, and she went to someone just to get relief from her shoulder pain. And she wound up with an inner teacher. And this inner teacher, channeled through her. Okay, next one. And she wrote this booklet called Attuning to Inner Guidance. And this is the spirit. This is the demonic spirit, not her speaking. In this book, Attuning to Inner Guidance. When the coming together time is here, you'll all slip into gear without much resistance to each other. So the spirit guide or demon is telling her there's something called the coming together time that's in the future. That induction will come as a snap when enough of you are united in spirit. So when enough people get under their control, it'll come just real easily. It'll come in a snap. When enough of you are united in spirit, in other words, under their control. Okay, next. You must be, this isn't her speaking, this is this demon speaking. You must be exactly where you are, doing exactly what you are doing. Notice that, we cannot stress how vital that is. This is like a movie, isn't it? We cannot stress how vital that is to the overall work that is happening in Portland and everywhere right now. Trust. Okay, next. The master will guide. Do not have concern. It is all happening. Make inner guidance commonplace. Get it out there for the everyman. That means meditation. I love you, Storma. Nothing is more important than to be a clear, resonating vessel to channel through the will of the universe. Trust in me, your Lord. Trust in me, your Lord. Okay, next. So, if this was just, like 30, 40 years ago, it wouldn't be, you could accuse me of scare tactics of just, trying to get people worked up emotionally. But this is from, remember that woman I said looked so unoccultic, remember? Yeah, soccer moms, you got a soccer mom look. This is what she wrote. Today, people of all religious and spiritual backgrounds practice Reiki. I have had Reiki students from a wide variety of religions. In one Reiki class, I had a Muslim, Hindu, Catholic, fundamentalist Christian, and agnostic. Okay, next. My students are teachers, psychologists, healthcare professionals, nurses, doctors, veterinarians, massage therapists, horse and dog trainers, yoga teachers, engineers, biologists, firefighters, EMTs, soldiers, corporate executives, moms, dads, kids, you name it. What I have learned from my Reiki classes, clients, and readers is that we are the mainstream. And that's my message to you this morning, that things like this, once Reiki didn't even exist. Before the 1970s, there were no Reiki channelers in the U.S. So now they're the mainstream, and they're going to stay the mainstream. This isn't a fad. This isn't something that's going to just disappear. Okay, next one. In 2011, Presence Magazine, the official magazine of Spiritual Directors International, stated that there were now 2 million Reiki channelers in the United States. They went from 1 million in 2004 to 2 million in 2011. So they doubled just in that one time frame, and that means they're going to go on to 3 million, 4 million. They're going to keep they're going to keep growing. So 2 million Reiki channelers, just in the U.S. Okay, in the early to mid 1990s, this is from a Reiki master in England. It's not just America. In the early to mid 1990s, Reiki was pretty much an unknown word in the UK. That's England, Great Britain, Scotland. There were a few books on Reiki in the major stores, and it had yet to be discovered in a meaningful way. Okay, next. From the year 2002, it would be difficult to find a village in the British Isles where there are not a number of Reiki practitioners. There has been an enormous proliferation and has been written about in all manner of publications, including the national press. So now it would be difficult to find a village, just one village in the British Isles where there are not a number, more than one of Reiki practitioners. Next. And this isn't in Britain, this is in Ireland, and this is proof of it. This is the village of Skibbereen, and you can see that it's like 200 miles from Dublin. It's not that far from Cork, but it's way far away from Ireland's major city. You can see it's just a little village. Well, we stopped there. We're going to find a place to eat. We were going to the coast. You can see it's down by the coast. And this is what we found. Okay, next. There were 3 places, there West Cork Holistic Therapies, 3 places like that did Reiki. We were just looking for a place to eat. And we stumbled on just 3 places that did it, just within a couple of blocks of each other. So Reiki had saturated this little village in Ireland. Next. So we went in the bookstore, and on the wall there they had yoga classes, and then there was a little in the little bookstore they didn't have a religion section. They had a section that says, see where it says positive living. They had one book by a priest, and all the other books were New Age books. That's what I meant. Neil Donald Walsh, channel books, occultic books. All the rest were New Age. And I could see that the Catholic Church had been completely driven out, and now this was the religion of Ireland. Whole countries. Basically, the man of sin could come to power in Western Europe, in the European Union right now, and it would be totally ready for him. The population has been totally indoctrinated in these practices and these philosophies. Okay, next. And here's where it gets kind of, for those of you that are ex-Catholics, it gets kind of ironic. As you're coming into Skibbereen, there's a shrine to Mary, and there's a plaque. You see a plaque just underneath her? Well, this is what it says. Okay, next one. This plaque says, Mary, Mother and Queen, we place this town and us, its people, in thy keeping. So in essence, that was probably put up, many decades, maybe even in the 1800s, and now the town has been completely given over to familiar spirits. In essence, they should have put their protection and keeping in the Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, next. That was a guy from Ireland cast a Reiki spirit out of a woman, but had too much trouble with it technically, so I omitted it. Yeah, he said that this woman had been going to church for like 2 years or so, and she's still having problems. So they found out she had been to a Reiki healer. It wasn't a Reiki channeler, had just been to a Reiki healer. So they started to, he said, bring Jesus in, and she started to screech, and her hand went like this. She started to scream and screech, and they cast out of her, and it came up out of her, and that was a Reiki spirit. It was a guy from Ireland, I had a video of that. Well, at the Berean call, they didn't want me to show it because they said it was too subjective. There was no proof of anything. It was just, maybe it was, there's no way to prove it was a Reiki spirit, but I believe it was. But anyhow, okay, next one. In Germany, there's 600 to 700,000 Reiki channelers in Germany. So, Reiki is so popular there that people are starting to put tattoos of Buddha on their legs. Because Reiki comes from Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. So there's a guy with a Buddhist tattoo of Buddha on his leg. Next one. There's this coffee bar there, like a Starbucks type thing in Germany, and the guy that owned it, put a statue of Buddha on the roof. Do you see it there? Does everybody see it? Well, it has nothing to do with the Buddhist religion. It's just that the New Age has become so popular in Germany that he thought he'd draw customers by putting a statue of Buddha on the roof. So again, that's what I'm trying to say, that Western Europe, England, Ireland, Germany, probably France, Holland, Belgium, Italy, Spain, Portugal, this is becoming the religion of these countries. The man of sin could come to power at any time in Europe, because this is now the religion of Europe. Okay, next. So how do we respond? How do we responded? That's a typo. I hate typos. How do we responded? Oh, I'm totally humiliated. Well, the Lord does this to keep you humble, You see, it's not me, it's the information, right? How do we respond? Okay, next. Okay, this is the scripture part here. This is the how do we respond? This is the Bible. We're Christians. We can't sit by and just let this happen. We have to reach people. We have to talk to people. We have to let them know that there's a valid reason for not going in this direction. And probably the biggest one would be, regard not them that have familiar spirits, neither seek after wizards, to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. Remember that demonic spirit said, trust in me, your Lord? You remember that? Trust in me, your Lord. Well, see, this is it. This woman, this teacher, had fallen under the power of familiar spirits. See, the word wizard there in Hebrew means a knowing one, someone who has the knowledge of demonic spirits, a knowing one. And that woman who had went to a Reiki channeler, now had an inner teacher which says, trust in me, your Lord. Well, she's been defiled. That woman, Storma, has been defiled spiritually. So I am the Lord your God. So you can't have both. You can't sit at both tables. Next one. The idea that your true self is divine, God is within. Psalm 39:5 says, verily, every man at his best state is altogether vanity. Nothing, empty, vanity. Okay, next one. Romans 7:18, I know nothing good dwells within me. That is, in my flesh, in you. There's nothing good in our flesh. There's nothing good deep within us, because if that was the case, if we really were divine on the inside, you wouldn't need police departments. You wouldn't need laws. Everybody would be perfect all the time. Okay, next. I will ascend. This is Satan saying this, Lucifer. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. So in Reiki and yoga, you are like the Most High. You are God. Reiki is based on the chakras. Okay, next one. So basically what we have here is the preaching of the cross versus the preaching of the higher self. On one hand, you have, like I said earlier, redemption, faith, being delivered from your sins, being born again. The other part, you have connecting with spirit guides and having them guide and direct you, and you kind of follow their orders. Remember, get it out there for the everyman, make it common. It's the polar opposite of, the Great Commission. Next one. Deepak Chopra. You probably heard of him. He's a major New Age figure, and he wrote this book called The Third Jesus. Okay, the first Jesus is the historical Jesus. There was a man named Jesus. Okay, the second Jesus is the Christian Jesus, who we worship. But the third Jesus is the New Age Jesus, who people are now turning to. And that Jesus, was a New Ager. He came to model our divinity, so we could become divine like him. He modeled it. And he says, if there is such a thing as God consciousness, no one can be excluded from it. And, just common sense. He's saying that no one can be excluded from being God. You can be the worst person in the world. You can be Adolf Hitler. You can be Pol Pot. You can be Genghis Khan, and you're still connected to God, because God is a cosmic force which flows through everything and everybody. So no one is excluded from God consciousness. But what this does, it shows that sin doesn't matter. The idea of sin is completely ignored in this equation. Okay, next one. Romans 5:10, this is the answer. For if, when we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son. See, we were enemies. At one time, we were enemies of God, but we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son. Much more being reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. And Deepak Chopra and all the rest of them were saying that, there's no way you can be enemies with God, because God is your true nature. Okay, next one. For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved is the power of God. So that's the controversy here, the preaching of the cross. And I know all of you, under Marco's tutelage, have been studying the preaching of the cross, for as long as you've been coming here. That's the central focus of this church. But that is the answer to this. Okay, next one. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name. So you can become the son or daughter of God, but only through faith. You don't have it inherently. Okay, the next one. Okay, here we go. This, by the way, Vanna White endorsed this book. On Wheel of Fortune, Vanna White endorsed this. This is the end here. This kind of sums it up. This book is called Awaken the Spirit Within. And this woman says, Rebecca Rosen says, the unseen world, our guides, are present with us every day, waiting for us to call on them, to lovingly guide us along and wake up to who we truly are. So in essence, she's saying that we need these spirit guides to wake us up so we know that we're God. And they're just hovering around. They're waiting to connect with people. And see, that's what I'm trying to get across. That this is happening on a vast scale. All these avenues I've shown you, these are ways to connect. That guy was biting his nails, and he went to a doctor. He didn't go to some cult. He didn't go to a cult. He went to his doctor, and his doctor said, you need to do mindfulness. He did it, and he said, unwittingly, I was engaging in a practice that was spiritual, and he was ambushed. And, all these people, they went to a woman that went to Storma, who went to the Reiki channeler because she had a problem with her shoulder. She had injured her shoulder skiing. She wasn't looking to change her religion or get a religion, but she wound up working for this inner teacher. So right here, this kind of nails it. There's these guides, the unseen world, and all the millions of people, 26 million people have attuned to them. And I'm trying to give you some ammunition that if you have any family members or friends, or if somebody's telling you something, that you need to do this, this is why you shouldn't. So anyhow, thank you very much for your time, and God bless.